Welcome back to another story. The wind was cruel that morning, sweeping across the barren plains like a reminder that mercy was rare out here. In a small, forgotten town of Dust Creek, a woman lay bleeding near the old well. Her face was bruised, her dress torn, and beside her 3 little girls huddled together, silent and trembling. Men passed by without stopping. Women peeked through cracked windows and whispered. No one dared to help, until a rancher, a man with a quiet soul and years of loneliness in his eyes, reined his horse to a halt. He looked at the scene for a long moment. Then he dismounted, knelt beside the woman, and said in a voice rough as gravel yet warm as sunrise, "You're coming with me." And that was how everything began. Eli Rawlins had been a rancher most of his life, a man known for his silence, his stubbornness and the land he worked alone. His wife had died 8 winters ago, and the years since had carved something hollow inside him. He spoke little to anyone but his horses. That morning, he'd ridden into Dust Creek for salt, nails, and whiskey, the 3 things that kept a man's world turning. But what he found was something else entirely. The town was half asleep under a pale sky, dust swirling through empty streets. Near the well, a man in a preacher's coat stood shouting at a woman, his voice full of venom. 3 girls. 3 useless mouths to feed. The Lord punished me with you. The woman's head was bowed. Her dark hair hung in tangles streaked with blood. Her daughters, one no older than 8, clung to her dress, silent as ghosts. Eli stopped his horse, jaw tightening. He'd seen cruelty before, in wars, in men, in himself, but something about this sight made the air burn inside his chest. The preacher raised his hand again, and that was when Eli spoke, quiet, firm. "That's enough." The preacher turned, sneering. "Ain't your business, Rawlins. This is between me and my wife." Eli dismounted, boots crunching on the dry ground. "Not anymore." The preacher laughed. "You gonna take her?" "Go ahead," she's cursed. "Can't give a man a son." God turned his back on her. Eli's eyes hardened. "Then I'll take the curse too." He took off his coat, wrapped it around the woman's shoulders, and looked her in the eyes, the first kindness she'd been shown in years. "Get your girls," he said quietly. "You're coming with me." The ride back to the ranch was long and silent. The woman said nothing, clutching her daughters close as they rode in Eli's wagon. Her eyes were wary, like someone who'd learned that every kindness comes with a price. Eli didn't speak much either. He just drove on, the reins steady in his hands. Every now and then, he'd glance back and see the youngest girl sleeping in her mother's lap, her face peaceful despite everything. By the time they reached his ranch, a lonely stretch of land between 2 dry hills, the sun had begun to set, painting the sky with fire. Eli helped them down, then motioned toward the old barn. "It ain't much," he said, "but it's warm. You can rest there tonight?" The woman hesitated. Why are you helping us?" He looked at her a long moment. "Because no one helped me when I needed it." That night, Eli sat by the fire outside, listening to the soft sounds of the girls sleeping in the barn. The wind was cold, but for the first time in years he didn't feel completely alone. When dawn came, he brought them bread and milk. The woman thanked him, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name's Clara," she said. "These are my girls, Ruth, Anna, and little May." Eli nodded. "You can stay here a while, till you figure where to go." She looked at him with tired eyes. "There's nowhere else," he simply said. "Then you stay." And as the sun rose over Dust Creek Ranch, 2 souls who had lost everything began to build something they never thought they'd find again, a fragile kind of peace. But Dust Creek wasn't done with them yet. Because word travels fast in small towns, and a preacher's rage travels faster. The morning sun broke over the mesas like a burning coin. Eli was already in the fields, mending a fence that had given up against the wind. Behind him, the faint laughter of children echoed from the barn, soft, hesitant, almost foreign to the quiet ranch. Clara's daughters were feeding the hens. The sight stirred something in Eli, a warmth he hadn't felt since before the fever took his wife. He didn't say it out loud, but the sound of laughter in that lonely land felt like the ranch itself had finally taken a breath. Clara stepped out of the barn, brushing her hair back. She wore one of Eli's old shirts tied at the waist, and though she carried a quiet sadness, she looked stronger than the day he'd found her. "You work too hard," she said softly. Eli smiled faintly, leaning on the post. "And you talk too kind." There was something in the way she looked at him, gratitude mixed with fear, as though she didn't know how to trust the ground beneath her feet yet. They shared breakfast on the porch, fresh eggs, black coffee, and silence. It was a comfortable quiet, the kind two people share when words are too small for what's been endured. But the peace didn't last long. By noon, dust began to rise on the horizon, the kind that meant horses. Eli's instincts tensed. He set his cup down, stood, and squinted toward the trail. "Stay inside," he said. Clara froze. "Who is it?" Eli's hand drifted to his revolver. "Trouble." Moments later, 5 riders came into view. The lead horse carried a man in a black coat and preacher's hat, the same man who'd beaten Clara by the well. His name was Pastor Gideon Cole, and his smile was the kind that made your stomach turn. "Well, I'll be," the preacher called out, reining in his horse. "Didn't expect to find my wife and girls shacked up with a sinner." Eli stepped down from the porch, boots heavy on the dirt. "They ain't yours anymore." The preacher dismounted slowly, brushing dust from his coat. "God says they are. And I don't recall asking your permission, Rollins." Eli didn't move. "You touch her again, you won't be preaching come Sunday." The other men chuckled, but it wasn't laughter, more like wolves growling before the bite. Clara came to the doorway, clutching her daughters. Her eyes met the preacher's and she flinched. "Please, Gideon, just leave us be," he sneered. "After you embarrassed me in front of the whole town? You think I'm letting that stand? You and those girls belong to me, by church, by law, by God." Eli's jaw clenched. "God don't live in Dust Creek anymore." The preacher's smile died. "Then maybe he'll watch from heaven while I take back what's mine." He nodded to one of his men. The rider started toward the porch, and that's when Eli's revolver cleared leather. The gunfire cracked like thunder. One man dropped before he hit the ground. The others froze, hands hovering over their belts. Eli's voice was low but steady. "You ride back to town. Tell them Clara and her girls are under my roof. Anyone who comes here with harm in mind leaves in a pine box." The preacher's eyes burned with hate, but even he knew when a man meant what he said. He mounted his horse, trembling with fury. "You'll regret this, Rollins. You're harboring another man's wife. A sin if there ever was one." Eli didn't answer. He just watched as they turned and rode off, dust swallowing them whole. When the last echo faded, Clara came running to him, tears streaking her face. "You didn't have to," he stopped her gently. "Yeah, I did." She stared at the lifeless man in the dirt, horror and relief fighting in her eyes. "They'll come back." "You know that," Eli nodded. "Then I'll be ready." That night the ranch was quiet again, too quiet. Eli sat by the fire, oiling his gun. Clara was inside, trying to calm the girls. The youngest, little May, peeked through the doorway. "Mr. Eli, are we safe here?" He looked up, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "As long as I'm breathing, you are." She nodded, satisfied, and ran back to her sisters. Later, Clara joined him by the fire. She sat beside him, silent for a while before saying softly, "You didn't just save us today. You gave us back hope." Eli glanced at her, the light catching her face. "You deserve better than fear." Her voice trembled. "You don't know what it's like, to be told your worth by men like him, to feel like even God turned away." Eli's gaze softened. "Then maybe it's time you met a man who listens instead of talks." For a moment, the fire crackled between them, and something unspoken passed, fragile, human, real. Outside, the wind rose again, carrying the whisper of vengeance from Dust Creek, because Pastor Gideon Cole wasn't a man who forgot humiliation. He'd be back, and next time, he wouldn't come alone. The days that followed were strangely calm and the kind of quiet that makes a man's skin crawl. Eli worked the land as he always had, but every hammer strike and every creak of the windmill felt too loud in the silence. He knew what was coming. Dust Creek didn't let things go, and neither did Pastor Gideon Cole. Inside the ranch house, life was beginning to take shape again. Clara and her girls cleaned, cooked, and mended what the years had worn thin. For the first time in months, laughter returned to the air. Little May chased chickens across the yard while Ruth read from a tattered Bible she'd found on a shelf. Eli pretended not to notice, but he caught himself smiling more often than he'd like to admit. That evening, Clara brought supper to the porch, stew, bread, and quiet gratitude. She sat across from him, her hair lit gold by the sunset. "You don't talk much," she said softly. Eli sipped his coffee. "Never saw the point of words that didn't fix fences or stop bleeding." She smiled faintly. "And yet the only thing you fixed was us." He looked at her for a long time, then said, "Wasn't me. You were already stronger than you thought." She turned away, blinking fast. "No, Eli, you don't understand. When you stopped him that day, I thought you were another man trying to own me. But you just gave us a chance. Nobody ever did that." He didn't answer, just looked out toward the darkening plains. "Then don't waste it." That night, thunder rolled far off over the mountains. The girls slept in the loft, Clara by the fire, and Eli sat outside under the awning, his rifle across his knees. The sound of hooves reached him just before midnight. Slow, careful, too careful. He slipped into the shadows beside the barn. 2 riders, not from town. Their coats were too clean, their boots too shiny. Hired men, they stopped by the gate. One spat and said, "Cole says to send a message. We burn this place if the woman ain't returned by Sunday." The other laughed. "Cole says she's his wife. Man's got to reclaim what's his." Eli's voice came from the dark, low and steady. "Tell your preacher to come himself next time." The first man barely turned before Eli's rifle barked once. The shot hit the dirt between his boots. Both spooked horses and bolted. "Run!" Eli shouted. "Before I stop warming up." They didn't need telling twice. Dust and panic followed them into the night. By dawn, Clara knew something had happened. Eli was quiet more than usual. He sat sharpening a knife that was already sharp enough. "They came last night, didn't they?" she asked. He nodded. "Scouts. Cole's building something. I can feel it." Clara's hands trembled as she poured coffee. "We should run." Eli shook his head. "Running only tells men like him they can chase you forever. This land's all I've got left. I ain't giving it up." Her voice broke. "And what about my girls? You think I can watch you die for us?" He looked at her, the kind of look that said more than any speech ever could. "Then don't watch. Help me fight." She stared at him, then nodded slowly. "Tell me what to do." They spent the day preparing. Eli reinforced the barn doors, set traps along the fence line, and dug a small trench near the gate. Clara and the girls filled buckets, gathered what little food they had, and whispered prayers over every small task. That night, the wind carried the faint echo of men shouting somewhere far off. Torches flickered along the distant ridge. Ruth, the eldest, looked out the window. "Mama, they're coming." Eli stood calm as ever. "Get the girls in the root cellar. Don't come out till I call." Clara grabbed his arm. "There's too many." He gave a faint, grim smile. "That just means they'll take longer to aim." She wanted to say something, anything, but before she could, he stepped outside into the cold. The first torch hit the ground near the corral. Pastor Cole's voice rang out, loud and furious. "Eli Rawlins, you've turned my wife into a harlot and my name into dirt. I'll have her back, and your blood with her." Eli stood on the porch, rifle in hand. "She ain't yours." "Never was." Gunfire erupted. The first bullet grazed the post near his head. Eli returned fire, one clean shot, dropped a man right off his horse. Cole shouted again, "You think God's on your side, rancher?" Eli chambered another round. "I stopped counting on God when I saw what men do in his name." Smoke filled the yard. The air turned to thunder, bullets whistling, wood splintering. Eli fought like a man with nothing to lose and everything worth dying for. Clara, from the cellar, could hear it. Each shot, each shout. Her daughters clung to her, praying. When she couldn't take it anymore, she threw the hatch open and climbed out, grabbing the old shotgun from beside the door. She stepped into the chaos, her hands shaking, but her aim steady. Eli turned in shock as she fired, dropping a man creeping toward the barn. "Told you not to come out," he shouted. "And leave you alone?" She yelled back. "You saved me, Eli. Let me save you once." By the time the smoke cleared, the yard was littered with empty shells and broken men. Cole's remaining riders fled into the darkness, leaving the preacher himself on the ground, wounded but alive. Eli stood over him, rifle aimed. Cole coughed, blood staining his teeth. "You'll hang for this, Rawlins. You took my wife. You killed God's men. Eli lowered the barrel slowly. God can judge me when he's ready. Till then, you stay away from my family. He turned, helped Clara to her feet, and pulled her close as the first light of dawn broke over Dust Creek Ranch. But he knew it wasn't over. Men like Gideon Cole didn't die easy, and vengeance out here had a long memory. The sun rose red that morning, blood red, the color of endings and new beginnings. The ranch yard was a battlefield turned graveyard, and Eli Rollins stood in the middle of it with his hat in his hands, his shoulders heavy but unbroken. Clara came out of the house, her skirt torn, face streaked with soot. The girls followed behind her quietly, eyes wide with the kind of fear no child should ever know. For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind carried the scent of gunpowder and rain. Eli finally looked up at Clara. You and the girls can't stay here no more. Cole'll come back. Men like him don't forget. She stepped closer, voice low but steady. Then we fight again. I won't run anymore, Eli. Not after what you did for us. He shook his head. You don't understand. This ain't over. You kill a preacher in Dust Creek, you make an army of enemies. Clara met his gaze with quiet defiance. Then let them come. They spent the next 2 days burying the dead, both Cole's men and the ones who'd fallen defending the land. Clara's hands blistered from the work, but she never stopped. Eli said nothing, but every time she looked at him, she saw the weight of 1,000 ghosts behind his eyes. That night, when the sky turned indigo, Eli saddled his horse. Where are you going? Clara asked. Town, he said simply. This ends tonight. She grabbed his arm. You'll be killed. He looked down at her hand, then back at her. Maybe. But if I don't end this, Cole'll keep sending men till you and those girls are dead. He's got to see what kind of man he's really fighting. Clara's voice broke. Then I'm coming with you. Eli's jaw tightened. You belong here, Clara. Not without you, I don't. He stared at her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Fine, but if bullets start flying, you run. Promise me. I won't. Promise. Fine, she whispered. They rode out under a pale moon, the prairie stretching endless around them. Every shadow looked like a rider. Every whisper of wind sounded like death on horseback. When they reached Dust Creek, the town was silent except for the creak of a sign and the murmur of the saloon. Eli dismounted, his boots crunching gravel. Inside, the saloon was thick with smoke and men who looked away as soon as they saw him. At the far end, behind a row of empty glasses, sat Pastor Gideon Cole, bandaged, pale, and full of venom. He smiled thinly when Eli approached. Come to confess, Rollins? Eli rested his hand on his holster. Come to end this, Cole laughed. You think killing me will make you right? You stole my wife, defied the church, turned good men against God. Eli's voice was like gravel. I didn't steal her. You broke her. I just picked up what you left to die. Cole's face twisted. You think you're righteous, rancher? You're just another sinner playing savior. Eli's eyes were cold steel. Maybe, but I protect what's mine. Cole stood slowly, one hand under the table, and that's when the room froze. Eli didn't need to see the gun. He heard the hammer click. One breath, one heartbeat. Eli drew. The gunfire cracked like thunder. Cole stumbled back, clutching his chest, eyes wide in disbelief. He fell, knocking over a glass that spilled red wine across the table, looking too much like blood. Eli stood there a long time, smoke rising from his revolver. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Clara's voice broke the silence. It's over. He turned to her, but she was pale. No, he said quietly. It's never over. It just stops hurting for a while. They left Dust Creek before dawn. Behind them, the town watched in silence as the man who'd killed a preacher rode away with the woman that preacher had damned. The ride home was quiet. Clara's hand found his on the reins halfway back. What'll we do now? She asked. Eli looked at the horizon, endless and empty and beautiful. Build, grow, live if the land lets us. And if it doesn't? He smirked faintly. Then we fight it till it does. Months passed. The ranch came alive again. Crops grew where nothing had before. The girls learned to ride and laugh and dream again. And on quiet evenings, Clara and Eli would sit on the porch, the sunset painting their faces in gold. Sometimes, the past came back in nightmares, in the creak of a door, in the whisper of wind through the grass. But they faced it together, because love, like the land, only belonged to those who fought for it. One evening, a wagon rolled down the dirt road, carrying strangers. A young man jumped off and tipped his hat. "You Eli Rollins?" "Who's asking?" "Marshall from Fort Garland. Heard what happened in Dust Creek. Folks say you killed a preacher." Eli's hand went to his belt, but the marshal raised a hand. "Relax, old man. We ain't here to arrest you. We're here to thank you. That preacher had a bounty the size of Texas for running guns under the name of the Lord." Eli blinked, caught off guard. "So I was right to shoot him?" "You did the country a favor." The marshal grinned. "World needs more men who ain't afraid to do what's right." He tipped his hat to Clara and the girls and rode off into the dusk. For the first time in years, Eli let himself laugh. A real laugh. He looked at Clara, eyes warm. "Guess God finally caught up." She smiled. Maybe he just took his time. If this story of courage, redemption, and love in the face of cruelty hit your heart, then don't let it fade away like dust in the wind. Share this tale with someone who still believes that goodness can survive in the hardest places. Follow for more cinematic Western sagas.